Hey guys. Okay, so today we're gonna read part 3 of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I'm in my bed. Say hi to my cute puppy Moose. He's sleeping right now. So I'm gonna read this to you, and then we're gonna answer the questions together. But today, just like yesterday, you are annotating on your own. Okay, so be sure to use the twist method. Also, I want you to keep in mind. Hopefully, you've already done the journal right, which was asking you to predict what you think will happen to Ichabod Crane, and to use textual evidence for that. So I want you to kind of be thinking in mind, keeping in mind throughout this whole thing what you think is going to happen to him and the other characters and just in the story in general. Okay, that's what our questions will be over today. They'll be over inferencing, predicting, and drawing conclusions. Okay, we're going to skip the editor's note and start with this second paragraph here. It was toward evening that Ichabod arrived at the house of Mr. Van Tassel, which he found filled with the pride and flower of the country. A world of charms burst upon him as he entered the parlor. Not those of the young ladies with their luxurious displays of red and white, but the ample charms of a genuine Dutch country tea table. There were sweet cakes and short cakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes, and the whole family of cakes. There were apple pies, peach pies, pumpkin pies, besides slices of ham and smoked beef. And then there were dishes of preserved plums and peaches and pears, broiled fish and roasted chicken, together with bowls of milk and cream. Ichabod was a kind and thankful creature. His heart expanded as his skin was filled with good cheer and his spirits rose with eating, as some men's do with drink. He could not help rolling his large eyes around him as he ate, and chuckling with the possibility that he might one day be lord of all of this scene of luxury and splendor. Okay, remember what we already learned about Ichabod? He loves to eat. That's his favorite thing in the whole world. So now he's dreaming about how he will one day inherit his father in law's land, future father in law, if he ever gets Katrina to marry him. And will get to eat all this food and own all of the land. I guess that would be when Mr. Van Tassel dies and he's just dreaming about that day. He's pretty focused on his stomach. Okay. And now the sound of music from the hall summoned everyone to dance. Ichabod prided himself upon his dancing as much as upon his vocal powers. Remember, he's a good singer. And not a limb, not a fiber about him was idle as he began to move to the music. The lady of his heart was his partner in the dance, smiling graciously in reply to all of his loving looks, while Brom Bones, his rival, sorely jealous, sat brooding by himself in the corner. Tales of ghosts and apparitions. When the dance ended, Ichabod joined a group of older folks smoking at one end of the piazza. They sat with old Van Tassel, gossiping over former times and sharing both long stories about the war. But all of these were nothing compared with the tales of ghosts and the apparitions that followed. I'm sorry, I lost my place completely. Okay, the neighborhood is rich in legendary treasures of the kind, no doubt due to the vicinity of the Sleepy Hollow. There was a contagion in the very air that blew from the haunted region, infecting all of the land with an atmosphere of dreams. Several of the Sleepy Hollow people were present at the Van Tassels, and as usual were doling out their wild and wonderful legends. Most of these stories concern the favorite specter of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, who had been heard several times recently patrolling the country, leaving his horse tethered in the churchyard. The isolated location of the church seems to have made it a favorite haunt of troubled spirits. It stands on a hill surrounded by trees, from among which its decent walls shine forth, like Christian purity beaming through the darkness. On one side of the church extends a wide woody dell, along which winds a large brook. Over a deep black part of the stream, not far from the church, there was a wooden bridge. The road that led to it and the bridge itself were thickly shaded by overhanging trees. I'm sorry, my dog is pushing me, which cast a gloom about it. That this was one of the favorite haunts of the Headless Horseman, and the place where he was most frequently encountered. The tale was told of old Brewer. We're gonna call him Brewer, who did not believe in ghosts, and how he met the horseman returning from his trip to Sleepy Hollow. They galloped together over hill and swamp until they reached the bridge, where the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton. He threw old Brower into the brook and sprang away over the treetops with a clap of thunder. Something must have gone wrong. This story was immediately matched by a marvelous adventure of Brom Bones, who said that on returning one night from a neighboring village, he had been overtaken by the headless horseman. Bones offered to race with him for a bowl of punch and should have won it too, for he had beat the ghost without question. But just as they came to the church bridge, the headless horseman bolted and vanished in a flash of fire. All of these tales sank deep into the mind of Ichabod. He repaid them in kind with large extracts from his favorite author, Cotton Mather, and added many fearful sights he had seen himself in his nightly walks around Sleepy Hollow. Remember, he's obsessed with scary stories, but he freaks himself out. He's very paranoid because of it. The party now began to break up, and soon the scene of noise and frolic was all silent and deserted. Ichabod lingered behind, according to custom of country lovers, to have a talk with Katrina, fully convinced that he was now on the high road to success. Something must have gone wrong, however, during this talk, for Ichabod eventually emerged looking desolate and disappointed. He went straight to the stable with several hearty kicks, roused his horse most rudely from the comfortable quarters in which he was soundly sleeping, so he kicked his horse away to ride away. Ichabod had never felt so lonely and dismal. It was the very witching time of night when Ichabod began his travels homeward along the sides of the lofty hills he had traveled so cheerily in the afternoon. The hour was as dismal as himself. No signs of life occurred near him, but occasionally the melancholy chirp of a cricket, or perhaps the twang of a bullfrog from a neighboring marsh. Remember, we talked about if you have me in class. I'm sorry, you guys haven't. So we haven't talked about onomatopoeia. So if you don't remember what that is from the younger grades, it's where a word makes is the sound that word makes. So boom, pow, bang, ding. Okay, so twang would also kind of be an example. Since it doesn't sound fully like the word it's making, but that's what they're getting at. So that would be an example of onomatopoeia. As if sleeping uncomfortably and turning suddenly in his bed. All of the stories of ghosts and goblins that he had heard in the afternoon now came crowding upon his memory. Ichabod had never felt so lonely and dismal. He was, moreover, approaching the very place where many of the ghost stories had been laid. In the center of the road stood an enormous tulip tree, which towered like a giant above all of the other trees in the neighborhood. Its limbs were gnarled and fantastic, large enough to form trunks for ordinary trees, twisting down almost to earth and rising again into the air. As Ichabod approached this fearful tree, he began to whistle. I'm so sorry. He began to whistle. He thought his whistle was answered, but it was just a blast of wind sweeping sharply through the dry branches. As he approached a little nearer, he thought he saw something hanging in the midst of the tree. He paused and stopped whistling, looking more narrowly, saw that it was a place where the tree had been scathed by lightning and white wood laid bare. Suddenly he heard a groan. His teeth chattered and his knees squeezed against the saddle. But it was only the rubbing of one huge bow upon another, as they were swayed about by the breeze. He saw something huge, misshapen, and towering. About 200 yards from a tree, a small brook crossed the road and ran into a marshy and thick woody glen, known by the name of Wiley Swamp. A few rough logs laid side by side served as a bridge over this stream. On that side of the road where the brook entered the wood, a group of oaks and chestnuts, matted thick with wild grapevines, threw a cavernous gloom over it. To pass the bridge was the greatest trial, for the stream was considered haunted. As he approached the stream, his heart began to thump. He summoned up all of his courage, gave his horse a few kicks in the ribs, and attempted to dash across the bridge. But his horse turned to the side and refused to cross. Just at this moment, a sound by the side of the bridge caught the sensitive ear of Ichabod. In the dark shadow of the grove by the edge of the brook, he saw something huge, misshapen, and towering, like some gigantic monster ready to spring upon the traveler. The hair of the frightened schoolmaster rose up on his head with terror. What was to be done? It was too late now to turn and fly away, and besides, what chance was there of escaping a ghost or a goblin, if that's what it was, which could ride upon the wings of the wind? Summoning up a show of courage, Ichabod demanded in a stammering voice, "Who are you?" He received no reply. He repeated his demand in a still more agitated voice, and still there was no answer. Once more he squeezed the sides of his horse, and shutting his eyes, began singing one of the psalms. Just then the shadowy object of the alarm pulled itself into motion, and with a scramble and a bound stood at once in the middle of the road. Though the night was dark and dismal, Ichabod could make out a horseman of large dimensions, mounted on a strong black horse. Ichabod's heart began to sink within him. Ichabod, who did not care for the strange midnight companion, thought of the adventure of Brom Bones with the headless horseman, and began to ride away in hopes of leaving him behind. The stranger, however, picked up speed until he was riding alongside him. Ichabod fell into a walk, thinking to lag behind, and the other did the same. Ichabod's heart began to sink within him, for there was something in the moody silence of this companion that was mysterious and awful. On mounting a rising ground, which brought the figure of this fellow traveler into relief against the sky, gigantic in height and muffled in a cloak, Ichabod was horror-struck on seeing that he was headless. He was even more shocked to see that on the head, which should have rested on the shoulder, was carried before him on the pommel of his saddle. His terror rose to desperation, and he rained a shower of kicks and blows upon the horse, hoping by a sudden movement to escape, but the spectre jumped along with him. Away then they dashed through thick and thin, stones flying and sparks flashing at every bound. They had now reached the road that turns off to Sleepy Hollow, but Ichabod's horse, instead of following it, made an opposite turn and plunged downhill to the left. The road leads through a sandy hollow shaded by trees for about a quarter of a mile, which leads to the old church. Halfway through the hollow, the straps of Ichabod's saddle gave way, and he felt it slipping from under him. He had just enough time to clasp the horse around the neck before the saddle fell to the earth, and he heard it trampled underfoot by his pursuer. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes that he was approaching the church bridge. The wavering reflection of a silver star in the brook told him that he was not mistaken, and soon he saw the walls of the church dimly glaring under the trees beyond. He remembered the place where Brom Bones' ghostly competitor had disappeared. If I can just reach that bridge, Ichabod thought, I am safe. He gave his horse another kick in the ribs and sprang upon the bridge, thundering over the resounding planks, then casting a look behind to see if his pursuer had vanished, according to the rule, in a flash of fire. Just then he saw the ghost rising in his stirrups, hurling his head at him. Ichabod tried to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It struck his head with a tremendous crash, and he tumbled into the dust, and his horse and the ghost rider passed by like a whirlwind. The body of the schoolmaster was never found. The next morning, the old horse was found without his saddle, chewing the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not make his appearance for breakfast or dinner. The boys assembled at the schoolhouse and strolled idly by the banks of the brook, but no schoolmaster appeared. Some people eventually set out to look for him, and after careful investigation, they came upon his traces. In one part of the road leading to the church was found the saddle trampled in the dirt, and on the other side of the bridge, on the bank of a broad part of the brook, was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close behind it, a shattered pumpkin. The brook was searched, but the body of the schoolmaster was never found. Oh no. Okay. Sorry, it skipped us down some. Hans Van Ripper examined the bundle that held all of his worldly possessions. They consisted of 2 shirts, a pair or 2 of stockings, a rusty raver, a book of psalm tunes, and a broken pipe. As to the books and the furniture of the schoolhouse, they belonged to the community, except for Cotton Mather's History of Witchcraft, a New England Almanac, and a book of dreams and fortune-telling. In the last of these was a sheet scribbled and blotted with several attempts to make copy of poems in honor of Katrina Van Tassel. Whatever money the schoolmaster possessed, he had received his pay only a day or 2 before he must have had with him at the time of his disappearance. The mysterious event caused much speculation at the church the following Sunday. Groups of gazers and gossips stood in the churchyard, at the bridge, and at the spot where the hat and the pumpkin had been found. The stories of Brower, Bones, and many others were called to mind, and when they had considered them all and compared them with the present case, they shook their heads and came to the conclusion that Ichabod had been carried off by the headless horseman. So they were basically debating whether or not this was a prank and somebody just kidnapped him for a minute or convinced him to hide and then threw the head there. Or if he left, they threw the head there and made it look like he went, but they decided that even with all the guys trying to prank him, this was real. As he was a bachelor and in nobody's debt, nobody troubled his head about him any more. The school was moved to a different part of the hollow, and another schoolmaster reigned in his place. Carried away by spirits. It is true, an old farmer who had been down to New York on a visit several years after brought home the news that Ichabod Crane was still alive. The farmer said that he had moved to a distant part of the country, had studied law, written for the newspapers, and finally been made a justice of the court. Brom Bones, too, who shortly after his rival's disappearance led Katrina in triumph to the altar, meaning they got married, was seen to look exceedingly knowing whenever the story of Ichabod was told. He always burst into a hearty laugh at the mention of the pumpkin, which led some to suspect that he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. The old country wives, however, who are the best judges of these matters, maintain to this day that Ichabod was carried away by spirits. Remember, they said that at the beginning, so that's repetition, even though it's in part 3, that housewives are the best judges of matters. They know everything because they gossip, right? It is a favorite story often told by the neighborhood around the winter evening fire. The bridge became more than ever an object of superstitious awe, and that may be why the road has been altered recently, so as to approach the church by the border of the mill pond. The deserted schoolhouse soon fell into decay and was reported to be haunted by a ghost of the unfortunate schoolmaster. The plowboy was walking home on a still summer evening, has often heard Ichabod's voice at a distance, singing a melancholy psalm tune among the quiet hills of Sleepy Hollow. The end. Okay, some of that reading was really rough. I'm not gonna go back and edit it out. I'm sorry. Um, Thanks for bearing with me. It's 9 o'clock. I just got home from doing school stuff all day and came to record this. So at the end of a long day and when I'm tired, I start to get a lisp and I start to stutter a little bit. Just thanks for bearing with me. Okay. Inference, predicting, and drawing conclusions. These are the questions we have to answer. How many questions do we have today? 3. Okay. Probably one for each. Read the paragraph from the section Carried Away by Spirits. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from this paragraph? The old country wives, however, who are the best judges of these matters, maintain to this day that Ichabod was carried away by spirits. It's a favorite story often told about the neighborhood of the winter evening fire. The bridge became more than ever an object of superstitious awe, and that may be why the road has been altered recently, so as to approach the church by the border of the mill pond. The deserted schoolhouse soon fell into decay and was reported to be haunted by the ghost of an unfortunate schoolmaster. The plowboy, walking home on a still summer evening, has often heard Ichabod's voice at a distance, singing a melancholy psalm tune among the quiet hills of Sleepy Hollow. All right, so what conclusions can we draw about that? The tragic incident involving Crane caused people to move away from Sleepy Hollow. It didn't say anything about anyone else moving away from it, so A would not be correct. The mysterious disappearance of Ichabod Crane had lasting effects in Sleepy Hollow. It said in another part that they went on to live their lives because he wasn't married and he didn't have any family and somebody else just took over as schoolmaster. So again, not going to be B. The experience of Ichabod Crane served as a precaution to the teacher who replaced him. Didn't say anything about that. Or D. The legend of Sleepy Hollow became more popular after Ichabod Crane began to haunt the schoolhouse. The best answer there is going to be D. It doesn't say that he haunts the schoolhouse per se, but they stopped using the schoolhouse, and the one guy did hear him, but it didn't say that everybody did or that he was for sure haunting it. But the legend was kind of amplified after that, and it did become more popular. So D would be the correct answer. Okay, number 2. Irving used the following lines to foreshadow what? Ichabod's heart began to sink within him, for there was something in the moody silence of this companion that was mysterious and awful. He's foreshadowing that he would soon be safe. Okay, obviously not. Mysterious and awful are bad words. He was grief-stricken over the Sleepy Hollow deaths. No. Ichabod would marry Katrina Van Tassel. He was hoping for it, but this part does not foreshadow that. Or D, Ichabod was in danger. That one's pretty easy. Hopefully you got it. The answer is D. Please remember to highlight these if you're not. Based on the ending of the story, the reader can infer that Ichabod Crane was A, taken away by spirits, B, got lost in a cornfield. D, got scared and ran away from Sleepy Hollow. D is pulling the greatest prank of all time. So it wasn't really Ichabod's thing to pull a prank. So if he did leave Sleepy Hollow, it wouldn't be to pull a prank. He was in love with Katrina, or technically in lust, but he thought he was in love. And the scariness of the valley, he was trying to escape whatever was getting him. So it's a stretch to say that he just got completely scared and ran away from Sleepy Hollow. He probably would have come back but stopped going out at night or something like that. Maybe that's a good answer, but maybe not the best answer. Um, B, got lost in a cornfield, or A, was taken away by spirits. That's going to be the best answer, especially because it says based on the ending of the story. And at the very end, it's talking about how he haunted the places. Even though that man said he came back, they swear that he was haunting it, right? So the best answer there is A, was taken away by spirits. Okay, please message me if you have any questions. Go back and annotate and twist if you did not while I was reading it. Hopefully you didn't spend all 20 minutes listening to that and not annotate, but if you did, please go back and do so. And then make sure you're submitting these. So to do that, you need to go back to the Schoology page and click Submit Assignment, okay? Don't share it with me. It's already shared with me. I already have access to it. I'm notified every single time you make a comment on it. So I know if you actually did do it, even if you don't submit it. I know if you did it on time or not. But please, please, please go back and submit it on Schoology so I can delete all of those emails about all of your comments. Okay, because keep in mind, I have like 130, 140 of you. It's a lot. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a good night.